Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani, and today's talk's going to be on a new article that just came by my desk in the last week on non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So this is really fascinating. It actually came out in the Journal of Central Nervous System and Neurological Disorder and Drug Targets about February 2nd. So if you want to Google that, you'll find it, 2015. And basically, this article is looking at non-celiac gluten sensitivity, NCGS, and its pathophysiological impacts on chronic disease. Now this is paramount because when we compare non-celiac gluten sensitivity, this is a functional condition, meaning it's not a disease, it's not something that something that people would recommend a drug for specifically, like IBS or IBD or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. It's not in that category. It's a functional condition that could potentially lead up to these conditions. So it's like if 10 here is disease and 0 is optimal health, well, we're kind of pushing our way 5, 6, 7, 8 towards a chronic disease condition. And so the research is finally starting to accept non-celiac gluten sensitivity as actually being real. And they're actually talking about some of the scientific mechanisms that are driving it forward, and they're basically driving a functional condition like non-celiac gluten sensitivity into a pathological one, almost in the same criteria as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or IBD, etc. Now, we have celiac disease here. Celiac disease is a pathogenic condition where you are sensitive to gluten, right? Gluten sensitivity is nothing more than a immunological, right? Your immune system reacting to the gluten. Now, what's paramount in celiac disease is we see endomysial antibodies, transglutaminase antibodies, potentially even gliadin antibodies, and maybe even a sample via endoscopy. So we see that in celiac disease. In non-celiac gluten sensitivity, we may not see those immunological markers. We may take the patient off of gluten, off of grains entirely, and they may resolve and get better. So the question is, they're not showing all of the immune system markers that celiac disease is, but they're still getting better when coming off of gluten. So they're not quite in the same autoimmune area that celiac is, but they're seeing improvement. And they're finding that when these patients, these non-celiac gluten sensitive patients, if they don't address these issues, they're going to continue to progress into a disease state. That was the conclusion in that article. I really want to highlight that and underscore it. Because we can come in here and we can prevent this path of disease from occurring by saying, hey, you're potentially non-celiac gluten sensitive. Let's avoid gluten. Let's do some of these strategies to fix the gut so we can start bringing it backwards. So let me break it down for you here in this Chalk Talk. So brain inflammation in gluten is paramount. Gluten has been shown in multiple studies essentially to decrease perfusion or blood flow to the brain. So we have our carotid arteries here, kind of like garden hoses to the brain. Again, in that blood is going to be oxygen and nutrition. So when we decrease blood flow, which is the main mechanism that we see with a person taking in gluten that's sensitive to it, we're going to have decreased perfusion, decreased blood flow, brain fog, immunological activation with the microglial cells, and we may even have migraines and headaches as well. So brain inflammation and gluten are paramount. The literature already supports that. Now we have this gut-brain axis, GBA, where the brain talks to the gut and the gut back and forth. And this happens via the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, the parasympathetic primarily being the vagus nerve and the sympathetic nervous system being our fight or flight mechanism. So ideally when the brain's talking to the gut and it's sending good vagal stimulation, it's saying, hey, rest, repair, relax, absorb, digest, utilize, assimilate nutrition. And when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in there, it's taking all that blood and saying, shunt that blood to the extremities, to the hands, to the feet, to run, to fight, or flee. Or if you get scared enough, you may have enough sympathetic nervous system stimulation to wet yourself even, right? I mean, you've seen that with kids and such. So depending on how much stimulation you can have a couple different scenarios, right? Sympathetic nervous system stimulation may just cause you an upset stomach, or it can cause you to wet your pants. We have parasympathetic or the vagus nerve stimulation to help rest, to digest, to break down, utilize, and absorb. And we want more of our parasympathetic during the day, ideally, because we want to be able to utilize all of the nutrients in our diet. And you can see this whole gut-brain axis, it's bi-directional, meaning it's going both ways. It's going from the brain to the gut and to the gut to the brain. And the interesting thing here is if we have dysbiotic bacteria in our gut, that can affect the signals going back to the brain, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if we have bad bacteria, dysbiosis, pathogenicity, lipopolysaccharides, infections, this can drive a sympathetic nervous system response back to the brain, and that can create inflammation. Also, the gut has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. So stress in the gut can affect stress in the body because, well, the body's going to release cytokines and inflammatory compounds and potentially even toxins from the various infections and pathogenic bacteria that could affect overall nervous system function. So you see the enteric nervous system really has an effect globally and locally at the gut. So a lot of what the gut's doing is controlled locally. Again, you're going to have some brain control via the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve, but a lot of that's going to be at the gut. The gut even produces its own neurochemicals, i.e. serotonin, to help with peristalsis. So you can see the enteric nervous system is paramount locally, but we have the gut-brain axis peripherally. And you can see it's a bi-directional, right? It's going both ways. Inflammation in the gut causes inflammation in the brain, and potentially vice versa. So you can see here, this is our bacterial balance over here. And what this study talked about is we have commensal bacteria. Commensal bacteria is kind of like a switch hitter in baseball. They can bat from the left or bat from the right, i.e. they can potentially be beneficial bacteria or they can potentially be pathogenic bacteria. And what makes that shift of beneficial to pathogenic will be things like sugar consumption, previous history of antibiotics, stress, poor sleep, insulin resistance, previous infections, current infections. So all of these things can drive and shift bacteria essentially to be a righty or a lefty, if you will. And this bacterial balance, if it's pathogenic, you can see the pathogenic side is way down more here. We're going to create dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is that shift in bacteria, right? The bad bacteria higher than the good. Vasovagal dysfunction, right? If we don't have that good stimulation from our vagus nerve, right, cranial number 10, that's not going to come down to the gut and it's not going to stimulate healthy digestion, assimilation, relaxation, absorption, right? Vagus nerve stimulation brings blood inward. Sympathetic nerve stimulation brings blood to the hands and feet to run and to fight and to flee. So vagal nerve stimulation brings blood inward. This is important for digestion. Insulin resistance is paramount for metabolic syndrome, for inflammation, for utilizing fat for energy. Very important. When insulin levels are high, we can't burn fat for energy. It's at least much harder. Lipopolysaccharide, this is the outer core of our gram-negative bacteria. So our gram-negative bacteria, the outer walls, the little finger-like projections out of these bacteria are what are known as endotoxins. And just highlight that last word, toxin. It's literally hepatotoxic, toxic to your liver, toxic to your body. So again, these things can cause leaky gut. So everything here that's happening, it's driving leaky gut. And a lot of the reactions that are happening, they're increasing this compound called zonulin. And zonulin basically unzips the tight junctions in our gut. It unzips it. So it's really important. We don't want to be stimulating zonulin. And diarrhea, obviously. Diarrhea is going to be paramount because it's the body trying to flood water to dilute toxins in our colon and our intestinal tract. And when that happens, we tend to have malabsorption. We tend not to break down our nutrients as well. And we tend to have, as a result, high amounts of bad or pathogenic or dysbiotic bacteria in its place. And you can see all of these things here, they're driving increased brain inflammation. And a significant percentage of the cells in the brain, the immune cells in the brain, are microglial cells. And the majority of them are immune cells. So our brain's nothing more than a good chunk of it's an immune system. And when we activate these microglial cells, they turn on and they keep on accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. They're like a positive feedback loop. And you can see decreased cognitive function. Part of that mechanism is because when we have inflammation, we have decreased blood flow, decreased nutrition, more stress, that drives blood away, and inflammation is going to be hard to turn off. So the study talked about a couple different things. It talked about vagus nerve stimulation, and Dr. Karazian talks about this in his book. I mean, you can get some water and you can gargle for a couple of minutes really hard in the morning. You can get a palate pellet spreader and just touch it to the back of your tongue and just have that gag feeling. Or you can sing really loud to stimulate the vagus nerve. Now, in my clinical opinion, this is not going to be enough to address the underlying issue. You don't have a deficiency in palate stimulation. You don't have a deficiency in gargling. You don't have a deficiency in singing. It's true. So a lot of these things, they are going to be palliative. They're going to be supportive. As much as I wish we could sing away our disease or our pathogenicity or our non-celiac gluten sensitivity, there are things that are higher up in the hierarchy that are driving a lot of these issues. Now, some things may be supportive, right? A lot of the vagus nerve stimulation may be supportive, but it won't address the root cause. And I just really wanted to delineate that so people could see the difference between palliative supportive versus underlying cause, root causal support. So vagus nerve stimulation. Also, alpha-7 nicotinic receptor agonists. All right, these are specific medications. They act on the acetylcholine receptors. So they're talking about medications in this study. Now, some natural things that we can do to activate or to stimulate that alpha-7 nicotinic receptor would be alpha-GPC, glycerol phosphocholene, L-carnitine, and even huperzine. These are things that would upregulate that receptor site naturally. We have corticotropic releasing factor receptor 1 antagonist. So these are things that are blocking, that's a mouthful there. The corticotropic releasing factor is basically a compound that's stimulating the hypothalamus to make ACTH. Then the pituitary makes ACTH, which then goes to the adrenals to make cortisol. So it's the real upstream marker to stimulate cortisol. So what they're doing is an antagonist. They're trying to block that receptor. So they're trying to dampen the cortisol response with this medication that they're recommending. So in natural medicine world, we would use things like phosphorylated serine. We may use ashwagandha or rhodiola or adaptogenic herbs to really get the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary, to cool down, and obviously lifestyle and dietary interventions as well. We wouldn't just use a corticotropic releasing factor receptor 1 antagonist drug that wouldn't essentially get to the root cause, but it may be good if you're in the conventional world. Also, probiotics are beneficial. There's lots of probiotics out there. Again, depending on what your situation is, we may use soil-based probiotics. We may use probiotics with specific strains such as Saccharomyces boulardii to increase IgA. Some people may have SIBO in this condition and they may not tolerate probiotics well. They may have to use specific strands that are less sensitive, if you will. And then again, antioxidants. So some antioxidants that have been beneficial in the literature are turmeric or curcumin, resveratrol, pine bark, pycnogenol. And those would be the main ones right there that would be beneficial at dampening the brain inflammation. So lots of stuff here in this video, pretty action-packed. I'm going to put the study below, and if you feel like you have a non-celiac gluten sensitivity issue and you have gut issues or other health concerns and you're not getting the answers and getting the support and you feel like you're chasing your tail in circles, feel free and click on the screen or reach out below to get a hold of me. Subscribe to my video series. I give you lots of hands-on info where I really break it down and try to make it simple for you. Again, subscribe for more videos. This is Dr. Justin signing off. Have a great day.